views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm Daren, Jaime, and if you're asking the question, what are we all about? Well, we take a look at the inequities that a lot of people face. We promote civic engagement, we get interviews with some very special guests, and we get a deeper understanding of the issues. We want you to stay with us because guess what? The Social Justice Forums begins right now. And welcome back. Green Worker Cooperatives is a South Bronx-based organization dedicated to incubating worker-owned green businesses in order to build a strong local economy rooted in democracy as well as environmental justice. They train and develop worker cooperatives, and they have a positive environmental impact and enable the transformation of their members as well as their community. We're pleased to be joined right now by the worker co-op developer at Green Worker Cooperatives, Danielle LeBlanc, and we thank you so much for joining us, Danielle.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And when we talk about green workers and just basically green economy, it's something that's on the rise. So share with us a little bit about the work that your organization does.
Sure. Our organization was started a number of years ago to help local community members start their own green businesses. About 5 years ago, we switched to pioneering the first worker cooperative business planning bootcamp. So it's a ground up academy model, and we call it the Co-op Learning Institute. And it helps train people to form their own worker-owned cooperatives in a number of industries. But one facet of that is promoting and teaching how to make your business green, no matter what industry or field it's in.
And so when we talk about making a business green, how hard a process is that? And how do you get people from point A to point B?
Well, it is a process that it's very intensive. And so we're actually working on trying to, take a deeper dive in that process. Traditionally, we focus on promoting having people think through their business cycle and trying to make it as zero waste as possible, seeing how they can reuse, reduce, and then of course recycle by either donating, swapping, etc. Their inputs and outputs. So it's really industry specific, of course, depending on what your business is. But so our founder and a number of our co-ops that have gone through our program have been very involved in advocacy work in the city, promoting the zero waste bill before it was put into law. And we also have a number of co-ops that are specifically green focused in their industry as well. So we have a cooperative called Green Fiend Organics, and they are a composting cooperative, and it was founded by Gior. And she would actually be a great person to have on your program. And we have a few farms. We have an urban farm called We Are Earth that does container gardening and also teaches communities, people, schools, how to start their own urban farms. We have a co-op that came through a program called SUNS, Solar Uptown Now Services, and they do solar installation. So we have green focused businesses like that, but we also have a number of businesses that from a range of industries like catering businesses, craft businesses. For example, Cards by Day, it's a card making business. And they've actually been very active in making their business zero waste. Yeah. So they're not a green quote unquote business in the green industry field. They take very seriously the process of reducing waste, reusing, recycling, etc.
Yeah. So I know you also have what's called 7 principles of cooperation. Can you explain to us a little about the principles?
Sure. So the 7 cooperative principles are actually shared by all cooperative businesses, entities, etc. So we help people create worker-owned cooperatives, but there are other types of cooperatives like um, food co-ops and there are credit unions, etc. So we all share these cooperative principles. And so they're voluntary and open membership, meaning that you co-op, right? You choose
Mhm.
to join and it's open um, to anyone um, who fits the service area or the membership area. So for example, for credit union, it might be open to people who are teachers. That might be their field of membership, but then you can't discriminate against different types of teachers, et cetera. As long as you meet the requirements, it's an open membership. Then there's democratic member control, meaning that there's membership has a say in what goes on with the co-op. Member economic participation in the cooperative, meaning you get to be involved in the economic activity of what your co-op is, and also you benefit and you share the fruits of that economic activity and participation. There's autonomy and independence, education, training, and information. And that's important because you can't really be involved in decision-making if you do not receive continual education and there's not transparency, et cetera, in what is important to your cooperative. There's cooperation among cooperatives, meaning that um, cooperatives try to work together and promote the principles of cooperative development. And lastly, is concern for community. Um, Most co-ops are formed because there is some benefit to the community or some need in the community that the people came together to address by forming the co-op.
Mm. So I know you also have a not-for-profit co-op academy, then you have the co-ops itself. Can you give me a little
Mhm.
bit about the difference between both and what you have going on with the co-op academy?
Sure. So the Co-op Academy, like I mentioned, is we call it the Co-op Learning Institute. And so it is a 5-month training program that um, is comprised of a 2-hour weekly sessions on various topics, such as um, it's various topics on starting a worker-owned cooperative business. So developing your business model, governance systems, um, financial management, et cetera. We also address things such as um, active listening and conflict resolution and um, accountability and just learning how to work together and make decisions as a group for your business. Um, so those sessions are over 5 months, 2-hour weekly sessions on those different topics. We also have clinics where um, the members can come in and work on their business model and answer questions and speak to each other. Right now, because of COVID, this is all online. For the past 2 years, we've been doing these sessions over Zoom. Um, and then we also have partnerships with other organizations. So for example, Take Root Justice, they provide pro bono legal assistance to the co-ops who go through a program to help them with their legal formation. And we also have partnerships with the Business Outreach Center to help people develop their financial projections and do financial analysis for their business. And we also have partnerships with financial institutions like the Working World, and co-ops are eligible to receive a loan from the Working World and other partners once they've started and have been doing business for 6 months to a year.
Mm. So I know one of your targets is really being able to help poor communities. Talk to me about how the work that you're doing is really impacting poor communities.
So Cooperatives are formed by two or more people pooling their talents and their resources together to form a business. And because of our academy model, where people come to us with their own business ideas, that they're creating businesses that they see fills a need in their local communities. These are all local businesses. So we help them get the tools to bring their ideas to life. And cooperatives, because oftentimes people don't have the financial means, and people work and have full-time start a business when you're doing it on your own, right? So forming a worker cooperative, you're able to pool the resources, to pull your talents, to pull your time together and form this business where you have equal say, and you also get an equal return in the work that you put into the business. It's not according to how much equity you could put in terms of financial equity. It's about the sweat equity you put in, and that's how you share profits and dividends of your business. And so, yeah, this a tool. Cooperatives are really a tool for people to address the needs in their local communities, see where the gaps are in their local economies, and meet those needs.
So for you, I know you're pretty busy, got a lot going on, but tell us about some events that you have coming up that maybe the public can participate in.
Sure. Well, we're actually right now hosting our Co-op Academy. We have a session tonight. We're about halfway through, and June 16th, we'll be having our graduation. It will be online via Zoom. And so we could share the registration details with you, depend on your website. And you can also visit our website at www.greenworker.coop, and that's COOP, greenworker.coop, to be able to register, attend the graduation, see what it's all about, hear from some of the teams that have gone through this year's Co-op Learning Institute, and learn about the businesses they're creating.
So for you, obviously, very hands-on and in-depth. Talk to me about the impact that you feel that the organization has made within the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, from our co-ops, actually, I could read a couple of quotes from some people who've been through our Co-op Academy. One of the things, we not only teach people and give them the skills to open a business and start a business, but they make connections and network with the other teams that are there in the program with them, and then also the wider cooperative community in New York City. There is a broad cooperative coalition here, and it's a place where people get support and really try to help and support each other in growing their businesses. So in the words of a co-op, this is a worker owner from We Are Earth, and they went through our 2021 Co-op Learning Institute. And she said that GWC helped me and my team gain the knowledge needed to start our co-op. They walked us through the steps of how to create a business model canvas, research potential customers, and make connections with other co-ops and potential partners. I greatly recommend GWC to anyone who's interested in starting a co-op but limited in experience. Plus, the GWC network is a great resource that you can always come back to long after you learn the program. And that's a key thing, because starting a business is it's a long process, it's a long path. And the most important thing is sticking to it and having the determination to go through the ups and downs of starting a business, especially when you're starting it, when you have, you don't have the freedom to like quit your job and, hire a nanny to take care of your kids and like focus all your efforts on your business, like call family, friends who could just, give you their credit card or give you money. Like this is a path for people who are dedicated and have a mission-oriented focus. So most of our co-ops while they're businesses, they are also mission oriented, right, to serve a need in their communities. And so, having the support system of a network like ours really helps people as they continue that journey past the actual boot camp program that we provide.
Well, Danielle LeBlanc, thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about Green Worker Cooperatives. We appreciate you, and thank you for the work that you're doing in enhancing our community.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, we are taking a quick break on the Social Justice Forums, and when we come back, we'll have another guest right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back. May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we are pleased to be highlighting a past interview with the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families, which is actively fighting for equity for Asian American families. We'll go to that interview right now. Joining us to share now more in this discussion, we are pleased to be joined by the co-executive director of the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families, Vanessa Leung. And thank you, Vanessa, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I gave a little intro into your organization, but for people who want to know a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about the organization.
Yes, so CACF, we were founded 35 years ago. We were founded by social workers and social service providers in 1986 here in New York, who felt that our government was not ready, nor prepared, nor understood the needs of our diverse Asian American community, as well as, really prepared to meet those needs in a really culturally responsive and a language accessible way. So it was really important for those providers to feel like they could come together as a united voice to really uplift the stories of those children families who are really struggling in New York. And every day, CACF does our work dispelling the model minority myth. The model minority myth is basically this assumption, a stereotype, that all Asian Americans are successful, they do well, they're quiet, they don't rock the boat, they put their head down and work hard. When in fact, there's so many who are really struggling with poverty, struggling with limited English proficiency, struggling to navigate the really complex systems of supports that the city provides. We also know that, the model minority myth in some ways creates this, this way that our government doesn't need to be held accountable to those who are struggling because it erases those struggles from the community. We also know that the model minority myth has been used to justify underinvestments in other communities of color as well. And so our belief is that every day we need to fight racism. We need to fight racism together. And we need to make sure that we're building strong coalition of the diverse AAPI community that represents the East Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander communities, but as well as draw strong connections and ties to other marginalized communities here in New York. So that is at the heart of our work.
Yeah, and so when we talk about advocacy, I know that you're big on the area of advocacy. You've got some things that you're really dealing with. Talk about some of the policies and the initiatives that you're dealing with right now, front and center.
Yes, so some really cross-cutting issues that again erases our community's needs is the lack of good data. And we all know that oftentimes government uses data to be informed of what policies they need to push, what kind of community response there needs to be. And what we've seen is oftentimes data on Asian Americans are not collected. And when it is, it's kind of just subsumed under this one umbrella. What we know what happened with COVID-19 and the pandemic, when we actually tried to, as a proxy, disaggregate data by last name, we saw that those with Chinese surnames actually had a huge number of infection rates that were hidden when we looked at city averages for the Asian American community. We also saw that South Asian surnames had a really high increase of hospitalization when, again, it was hidden when we didn't see it in the average Asian American numbers. So much of our work, and we've been working on this for decades, is to ensure that we have better data, that our city and state agencies collect better data so that there can be better policy and community responses to meet those needs.
Yeah,
I
didn't mean to cut you off. I want to talk a little bit about Access Health NYC, because I know that's very important to you, and really having access to good health should be for everyone, but particularly here in New York City, you're doing a job in terms of advocating there.
Yeah, so Access Health New York City, it is one of our collaboratives that we work across communities of color throughout the city and marginalized communities. Those who are really struggling to access the quality healthcare and health insurance and services, they're really important and kind of need that assistance, whether it be language assistance, navigating the complexity if they have if they are have issues around long-term implications of their health and really need to understand all their options. Oftentimes, I think what we've seen is there shouldn't be people who are not wanting to know about their health and fear about going to a doctor because they're scared they won't be able to afford it. And so Access Health provides those opportunities of knowing as patients what your Bill of Rights are, helping to navigate the complex systems of assistance that may be available to folks, even if they are undocumented, even if they're struggling with long-term health concerns.
And budget equity is also a topic of discussion for you. How do you see budget equity and how it affects you and how it affects your constituents?
Yeah. So, budget policy, not the most exciting thing, but we do believe that budget policy is social policy. It's what, folks want to invest in and what is important to them. And so for the AAPI community and for actually a lot of human service organizations in communities of color led and staffed by people of color, we see that there's actually a real lack of investments of government agencies to those organizations. This past year, when we saw a real increase in anti-Asian hate incidents, when we saw certain communities in the AAPI community actually see impact of the COVID-19 pandemic way before the shutdown, our community-based organizations were the ones that were present to help those families navigate a really difficult and challenging time. And many nonprofits, I think across the board, do this not because there's all this money in state, but it's actually part of their mission. And so while we've historically seen underinvestments across our communities, that was part of our fight to ensure that at the end of the day, communities that are in need get the resources that can really help them get through really difficult and challenging times, but also make sure that these are things that have been happening for a really long time. And maybe because there was a bit more attention this past year, we were able to kind of win $4 million from the city council, additional investments from the state. But we need to make sure that this is around long-term healing, long-term recovery. That's really important. And that at the end, we want to make sure that we stand together as a community, ensure that a budget is never balanced on the back of those who are in need.
Yeah, everybody's been affected by COVID-19, but can you give us a little bit more insight into some of the challenges and things that you can give us when it comes to the AAPI community and how they've had to deal with COVID-19 and the effects thereof?
Yeah, I think we've all seen some of the epicenters of the initial COVID-19, but we're many parts of Queens where there are large immigrant AAPI communities living. And we all know that when those who have already historically been marginalized in systems, navigating and trying to get through a pandemic is that much harder. When we heard about when COVID-19 before the shutdown, we already saw that certain communities, particularly Chinese community neighborhoods, those small businesses were struggling back in the beginning of last year. People were not coming, tourists were not coming. People were avoiding those neighborhoods of Chinatown, Flushing, Sunset Park. Those businesses were already seeing huge declines in their businesses. And then when the shutdown happened, for so many small business owners who may not, English is not their first language, navigating what was available to them, trying to get a PPP loan was not really accessible. Those continue to be challenges for small businesses across the board, but even particular for immigrant communities, it's that much harder to navigate. I think we also saw a huge, I think in certain challenging times, people like to identify a scapegoat. Want to be able to blame somebody or something. I don't think it helped that our previous federal administration did not really unite our country and actually identified the virus as coming from China and naming it things, that I think it made basically put a target on those who are East Asian presenting. There was a level of fear for folks around even just going to do their essential work that was really important. And I think that is really one of the things that are concerns for schools when schools were returning this year, is making sure that our young people and our families have what they need to feel safe. And when we want to define safety, we want to say that it's really about the presence of wellness. It's not about this absence of crime or the or kind of decrease in incidents overall, but actually making sure that communities have the resources and the services that they need to feel supported in their communities, making sure that they have the connections to people and making community connections across neighborhoods, so that there is this real feeling of being connected and being in this all together.
You led into my next question when you talked about the previous presidential administration and really the work that the rhetoric that was actually coming out of Washington, D.C., saying that it was the Wuhan virus and coming out of China. And that really did, because I did a couple of stories, really did affect businesses, particularly Asian American businesses, because of the stereotypes and the false information that was actually spread. Can you give us a little bit more insight into what you've learned in terms of how businesses were actually affected and how people actually who were essential workers actually had to really struggle and make it through, given the fact that you had this kind of stereotype and false misinformation that was hanging and looming over their heads?
Yeah, I think it was probably a really dark period for so many folks, in trying to be, the businesses were the only ways of actually being able to survive, right? That's what their livelihood was. And I think it became something that they had real concerns. We heard of businesses having to shorten their hours. There was a time when they were trying to, there was lots of just concerns about how they were going to make their monthly payments that they needed to do. There was just really a lot of concerns about what will happen, given that this happened even before the shutdown. The businesses not being able to have the same amount of folks coming through, they paying and being able to pay their workers. We heard a lot of folks who lost their jobs. And I think this is kind of where for CACF, we were able to start an emergency fund that many of our member organizations were able to distribute to folks who really just had no other options in terms of being able to survive through that pandemic. And so hundreds of $1,000s went through to really support families on the ground as they were trying to navigate this kind of downturn in business.
Yeah. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about Project Charge and the work that's being done there. Make our viewers a little bit more aware of your Project Charge.
Yes, so this is our health collaborative, really around, centering it like Asian American. What does it mean to have health equity for Asian Americans? And I think some of the key things that constantly come up are the challenges of navigating a healthcare system when English is not your first language. We've seen it through the pandemic when difficult decisions had to be made about who got health services or not, when there was an overworked healthcare workers who were trying to meet the needs of a number of folks and being understaffed themselves and having to make split decisions about who gets care and who doesn't. And when there was this need to find an interpreter, we've seen that actually becomes a deterrent to actually being able to provide immediate assistance. So Project Charge is really looking at addressing some of these issues systemically around the lack of culturally responsive systems, understanding, a system that may not understand the myriad of cultural challenges to accessing quality healthcare. The fact that so many within the AAPI community come from limited English proficient families. That means that nobody over the age of 14 speaks English well or at all. And we would never want to see a young person have to be an interpreter in a medical situation. But we've seen that happen before as well. So these are the things at Project Charge. We work as a collaborative to look at how do we increase the number of access for families to quality healthcare, affordable healthcare, and ensure that the needs of the diverse community are met.
Yeah. We know that 21% of Asian Americans, New Yorkers, are actually considered to be uninsured. And then also almost 40% of Asian Americans in New York City are actually enrolled in Medicaid. And so certainly some huge health challenges there. And I know that you're on the front lines dealing with that. If people want to get connected to helping to support the Asian American community, your organization, how can they go about doing so?
Yeah, you can, visit our website at www.cacf.org. And then we can also connect to community-based organizations that, serve the diverse Asian American community throughout the 5 boroughs. So as our members who are on the front line, who are direct service providers, they are language specific, ethnic specific, kind of issue specific in their services. But, together we come together as a united voice to ensure that we are united to fight for those most marginalized in our communities.
Vanessa Leung, it's been great having you, and thank you for the conversation and the awareness, and continue the advocacy. And we, of course, will continue to spread the word as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Vanessa. All righty. Well, we want to let you know we do have more show. We want you to stay with us as the Social Justice Forums continues. We'll be right back after this brief messages as I get and it gives me a break so I can get my words together. I'll be right back.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And welcome back to the show. SAGE is America's largest and oldest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ older adults. SAGE's innovative services and programs actually support thousands of LGBT older adults and individuals in the community as well as around the country. Joining us now, we're pleased to have the site director of SAGE Center Bronx, and we've got Jose Collazo. And Jose, thank you for being with us here on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Dan.
Yeah, and when we talk about, servicing the needs of this particular community, it's been something that's been at the heart for you for many years. Talk to us about the needs and what your organization really does.
Well, SAGE is the oldest and largest LGBT service provider in the country. Our goal is to serve and provide services and advocacy for LGBT older adults. And so when we look at the needs and what we're addressing, we're looking at economic insecurity, food insecurity, housing insecurity. After dealing with the pandemic, we've been dealing also with some of the digital divide that we noticed that a lot of our participants are dealing with at this point. Social isolation was a big one as well. It was prevalent prior to the pandemic, and even more so prevalent during the pandemic.
And when we talk about isolation, obviously a huge need that a lot of people are trying to overcome due to COVID. Talk to us about how you were able to really sustain during that time, because overcoming isolation was one of the things that I hear a lot of organizations saying that they had to spend time with their constituents in terms of trying to deal with. How were you able to roll out services?
Well, when the pandemic came, you're right, we were at a loss of how we're going to provide these services that were very crucial to our LGBT older adults. And so a lot of calls, we constantly made wellness calls. We made thousands of wellness calls throughout the week. We had case management involved in that process. All the staffs were dedicated into that process. We worked with the Department for the Aging to make sure that home meals were delivered to their home. Many of our participants used to come to our center to have our daily lunch. And for many of our participants, that may have been the only meal that they received. And so we found it to be real crucial to make sure that they had some meals delivered to their homes. We had called local pharmacy to make sure that they had home delivery for their medication. We had worked with local pantries to see if they can deliver some of their pantry items to their homes. We also created a whole virtual world where we were providing services and activities and events in the virtual platform. And so, we still continue providing art programming, exercise program, nutrition classes, and even special events on the screen so that they can come together and address some of the isolation issues that are very prevalent in our LGBT community.
Walk me through this, because I know that a lot of the work that you do also stems to dealing with public policy, really advocating on behalf of your constituents. For somebody that may not be so familiar, what are some of the things that maybe we're not privy to that your constituents are dealing with that you would like to see addressed?
Right now, as my memory recall, there's still 28 states that don't have protection for LGBT elders and just the LGBT community. And so we have an advocacy arm in SAGE, at SAGE, and we're constantly addressing those issues through Washington, through Albany. We work with our participants to at least solicit information and to also gather knowledge around what their needs are, so that we can like bring those information up, so that that can be addressed either in Washington or in Albany.
When we talk about Albany, obviously a lot of people are paying attention to what goes on in the state and state protections. Have you been successful in at least being able to get the ears of elected officials to make them sensitive and also proactive in dealing with this?
You know, we've been very lucky to have many of our local politicians to be really part of our vision and our mission to provide a healthy and active lifestyle for our older adults. And so we've been very successful being on the table, so that we can share what we know about our population and the needs that are in our population.
And with that population, I know that prior to COVID, we talked about prior to COVID, some things that were going on. And one of those things that were going on was food insecurity. It was happening before COVID, during COVID, and, you know, as we're navigating out of it. But talk to us, because I know that you've done a good job in terms of providing meals for older adults as well.
Absolutely. And you're right. Many of our participants used to come to our center to receive their daily meals. We also had pantries that they were a big part of coming in and receiving 40 pounds of pantry. And when the pandemic happened, that stopped for a bit, but we really worked a lot with our local pantry distributors and agencies that work closely with us, like New York Pantry. And we were able to identify areas that they can go to get their pantry. And as well as have some of those pantry delivered to them. A lot of the time we had staff and volunteer and even participants who chipped in to deliver some of that pantry to folks that weren't able to come out or were afraid to come out. A lot of our participants have some ailments or as part of the aging process, lack mobility. And so, you know, we found that many of our participants didn't even want to go out or wasn't able to go out. But we were able to work around that with volunteers, with interns, with the staff themselves to go and deliver those items that are most needed.
And sticking along those lines, I want you to do me a favor and share a little bit, because you have something that's pretty unique. It's called the Cyber Cafe. And for those who don't know about the Cyber Cafe, why don't you share? Yeah,
so we have 15 computers in this room that we call Cyber Cafe. And I think it's been huge. I think prior to the pandemic, there's always been a resistance to technology with many of our older folks. And we noticed there was such a big digital divide during the pandemic. And so now participants come to our Cyber Cafe to utilize it to make doctor appointment. Now telehealth is big. And so many of them use the Cyber Cafe to make appointments or to be at an appointment, dusting of their resume, and even connecting with their family members. The computer and the internet was very crucial for us to stay connected during the pandemic, and it continues to be so. And our computer room our Cyber Cafe has been hugely attended and utilized. So I know that nowadays, in particular New York City, and you're located in the borough of the Bronx, that there's a lot of talk about affordable housing, being able to really be in an affordable place, and skyrocketing rents, and economic downturn seems to affect a lot of people. When it comes to yourself and your organization, how are you addressing the issue of housing services for your constituents? Well, we have work in collaboration here in the Bronx with Help USA to provide 83 units of LGBT-friendly housing. And so that has been one. We also open up another housing development over in Brooklyn. And so we've been addressing not just in form of advocacy with the state and the federal government, but we also have been implementing some these housing projects that have found its way to the Bronx and in Brooklyn. We also have tenant coordinators that help the participants to acclimate into their new home. We just gotten a housing specialist now that is working with the community around affordable housing and housing needs. That has been crucial. When we opened our door, one of the biggest issues that we had were people looking for housing and affordable housing. And although we were just focusing on those that were living at our 775 Crotona Park North, we now have the ability to work around those needs with our housing specialists.
So as we look forward to the future, obviously a lot of pending needs within the community. We talk about housing and really making sure that people are having that stable need. What are some of the things that you're hearing from your constituents in terms of immediate needs right now?
Yeah, right now is help with their rent. A lot of our participants, I would say, that does attend the Bronx, 90% of them they're the poverty line. And so, and understandably so, right? LGBT older adults are twice as likely to live alone and be single. They're also 4 times less likely to have children. And so they don't have like the economic help and security that their counterparts may have. And so, so a lot of the needs are looking for housing, looking where to find that. So there's a lack of knowledge of where to kind of navigate that process. And so having a housing specialist here, having staff that are knowledgeable around the housing community has been very helpful to address some of those needs.
So when we talk about providing services, obviously I know that you guys do case management and really trying to do wraparound services for your constituents. Are you finding that more recently that your numbers are rising in terms of needs, or are things pretty much at a level playing field right now?
No, the needs have shifted, right? The trends have shifted. And so we're finding that more of our participants are looking for more transportation and how to navigate accessoride. Pantry and food issues that are dealing with food insecurity has risen. And so we're dealing with some of it. And housing, again, has always been sort of like that, that common thread through a lot of our participants when they come into our doors.
You do have support groups, and I'm aware of that. Are you finding that people are finding that safe place and being able to share some of their challenges, some of their struggles? Because when we talk about the whole isolation issue, the greatest challenge, I think, is really having somebody to talk to.
Absolutely. We have various support groups. We have the Latino Gay Men's Group that we have here. We have the L Group, which is our lesbian identified support group. And other LGBT specific programming that runs out of this building. And we also have a lot of special events. We just had like a couple of weeks, our Mother's Day celebration, where we had a performer come in and had a special lunch. We celebrated Honor Your LGBTQ Elders, where the commissioner of DIFTA came by, spoke to us and said a few words. And it was a time to honor and celebrate our LGBT elders. Sometimes we forget they were, a lot of our elders that come here were living during maybe one of the darkest and ugliest time in regards to homophobia back in the 60s and 70s. Many of them lost their jobs, many of them were beat up, many of them were able to come out. And so they really paved the road for this generation that we have now. And we need to celebrate them. You know, they took care of us, and it's time for us to take care.
Yeah, you used the term homophobia, and I know that's still prevalent in our society. Do you think that things are getting better when it comes to dealing with that? Because as we know, when you talked about originally starting, there was that stigma and the stereotype. But where do you see things right now?
I think, you know, we always go back and forth with things that have gotten better. It's a different generation. You know, we do have an intergenerational program here. And so we have LGBT youth helping us on our day-to-day. And so it's always great to hear some of the discussion. You know, we're living in a time that you do have LGBT student alliances in high school where you may not have found that back in the 80s and 70s and 60s. And so although there have been areas that have improved, we're still seeing homophobia, although it's covert, right? And so recently in the news, you've been hearing LGBT rights being attacked, which is which we've been having a lot of discussion in space around. And our participants are very resilient. And so they lived through those ugly times of homophobia back in the 50s and 60s, 70s. They lived through the HIV AIDS epidemic. They lived through 9/11. Now they're living through pandemic. And so they know how to fight in regards to surviving and addressing their needs.
Yeah. Jose, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us, brother. I think it's been a good conversation and making people aware of the work that Sage is doing. Continue to keep your boots on the ground, and thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you for your support, Daren.
All righty. Jose Collazo, our guest here on the Social Justice Forum. Well, I want to let you know we come to the end of our show today. We hope that you've enjoyed today's discussion. We encourage you to join us next week. We continue to elevate the conversation, the dialogue, and bring you some very informative guests. And as always, if you want to find out more, don't hesitate to go to the website at BronxNet.org. And if you want to see more, come back next week and join us again for the Social Justice Forums. Until then, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care and God bless.